Hey y'all, welcome again to another exciting episode of the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup. I am your host and moderator, Cypher here, and today we are going to be covering a lot of news that came out just today with the kind of analysis only the crowd can provide. If this is the first time you've ever joined us, hey, welcome everybody. Hey, glad you could join us. We do this news roundup every Thursday from about 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to about 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, covering the news that was of the last week with the kind of analysis only the crowd can provide. So on today's program, we're going to be covering a lot of different things. And among those things is going to be January 6 updates with DOJ leveraging new charges against people, the vaccine mandate being squashed by the Supreme Court in part, and other things. So yeah, if this is the kind of stuff that you like to do, we do this, like I said, every Thursday. We also do another program called Cypher State, and Cypher State is a foreign affairs and foreign policy focused podcast where we talk about a issue that is happening in the world with kind of with more in-depth analysis than you would get in the kind of news blast. Our last episode was called Taliban Land, and you can find that on YouTube or soon to be wherever you can get your podcasts, because it takes me a long time to edit, apparently. Longer than it should. Just been really busy with real life lately. If you joined us last week, you noticed that maybe I was a little sick. I was probably infected with COVID. Not entirely sure if I was, but I'm feeling better now. Just got a cough, a little bit of congestion, but we're back and better than ever, actually. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the news. All right, so welcome back. That's just our little intro video that we like to do for YouTube. So let's go ahead and get started. So up top in the news hour this evening, we're going to talk about the filibuster and voting rights. President Biden and Vice President Harris were in Georgia on Tuesday to talk about the Voting Rights Act. We're going to bring you some clips for that, so just hold tight. I forgot to actually set up videos, so let's go ahead and do that. Sorry about that. I just need to do this, and then Chrome, and then make sure to get the right one. There we go. All right, so let's get started.
This opportunity again. Senate Republicans have exploited arcane rules to block these bills. And let us be clear, the Constitution of the United States gives the Congress the power to pass legislation, and nowhere does the Constitution give a minority the right to unilaterally block legislation. The American people.
So what Vice President Harris here is talking about is the fact that the filibuster has been used to block voting rights now and in the past. And what she is alluding to is the fact that we need to go back to a time where the filibuster wasn't used as much, and that we get to regular order and having a majority pass the will of the people, especially in the Senate. This is something that if you're like younger, you probably don't have any recollection of or any memory of actually happening, because as soon as President Obama was elected to office, the Republicans decided to flex their muscles in the Senate and try to prevent everything that he would do. This was actually starting around 2010 or so, after Mike Brown won the special election seat in Massachusetts to replace Ted Kennedy, the Lion of the Senate. And this was all around the idea of providing healthcare to people, the ACA, public options, etc. So this is what she is alluding to here. And it really doesn't seem like we will actually see voting rights pass because of the things that we're going to hear in these videos. So let's go ahead and continue.
People have waited long enough. The Senate must act. And the bottom line is this. Years from now, our children and our grandchildren, they will ask us about this moment. They will look back on this time, and they will ask us, not about how we felt. They will ask us, what did we do?
Now, to give a bit of more context here, there have been a slew of measures that have passed out of Republican-controlled state legislatures that would limit what localities can do in terms of allowing people to vote. And with that, what we mean here is that we are talking about things such as waiting in line and not being able to get provided food or water to people, closing polls in some areas and not others, changing the time frame to vote, for either reducing the hours that early voting is available, or reducing the and then those kind of things. What they're also talking about is that during the pandemic, there was a lot of emergency measures put into place that increased the ability to vote by mail. And a lot of Republicans are like, no, we can't have that, because they believe election fraud would happen. But honestly, it's probably more along the lines of, if there's too many people voting, then that's bad for Republicans. And this is also in regards to, so all those things are part of that. And then in addition to voting rights, there's also the gerrymandering issue, which we'll get into later. But this is specifically about voting rights. And you could see this in places like Harris County in Texas. Harris County is where Houston is located. It's the most populous county in Texas. And during the pandemic, they allowed for things like drive-through voting, where you could drive your car up to the voting place. A poll worker would come in with a little computer in hand, and you would be able to vote from your car, and then they would take it over. And I don't know why anybody would be against that. It's not like it made it possible to cheat. It was still the same voting system. It was still the same thing. They still had the cartridges that registered people to vote and looked up the information. So that was one of the things. And another thing, and I don't know if it's in this clip, but another thing that they did was allow for people that were helping elderly and disabled parents and family to vote. And they don't want that either, because they're worried that they're going to vote for them or something. So, but let's continue watching the clip.
We cannot tell them that we let a Senate rule stand in the way of our most fundamental freedom. Instead, let us tell them that we stood together as people of conscience and courage. Let us tell them we acted with the urgency that this moment demands. And let us tell them we secured the freedom to vote, that we ensured free and fair elections, and we safeguarded our democracy for them and their children.
Right, and we have, so we also have remarks by Biden. I'm going to get those up now.
This opportunity, again.
Hate that. Let's take it out. Here we go. And here are Biden's
Sadly,
remarks.
The United States Senate, designed to be the world's greatest deliberative body, has been rendered a shell of its former self. It gives me no satisfaction in saying that, as an institutionalist, as a man who was honored to serve in the Senate. But as an institutionalist,
damn near all his life.
I believe that the threat to our democracy is so grave that we must find a way to pass these voting rights bills. Debate them, vote, let the majority prevail. And if that bare minimum is blocked, we have no option but to change the Senate rules, including getting rid of the filibuster for this.
Yes, get rid of the filibuster. So there have been talks in the Senate over the last 4 or 5 weeks about making the filibuster harder to use. But as we're going to get into the program later with these after these remarks, is that is probably not going to happen. And Biden specifically being against the filibuster now is a really turn for him. Biden has always been a kind of, hey, if it's not broke, why fix it kind of person. He doesn't think that the filibuster should be, he has not thought that the filibuster should be jettisoned, because he's worried about has been, at least in the past, worried about Republicans using the new thresholds to pass legislation that is anti-democratic, or at least anti-democrat, and that being things like abortion rights, or maybe their own version of voting, or maybe things like I don't know, what are their social policy? I don't know. Don't Ask, Don't Tell can't get through the Supreme Court now, but maybe they would try something like that again. Who knows, right? And so he's been concerned about those sort of things. And now he's saying, hey, get rid of the filibuster. We don't need it anymore. It's keeping us from getting voting rights in, and we desperately need those voting rights laws changed in order to ensure that as many people can vote as possible without any fuckery happening to prevent them from voting. And he's talking about legal voting here. No matter what Republicans say about like illegal voting or what have you, like that's not what Democrats want. Democrats just want as many people as possible to vote. Okay, so but let's continue to hear these remarks.
You know, last year, if I'm not mistaken, the filibuster was used 154 times. The filibuster has been used to generate compromise in the past, promote some bipartisanship, but it's also used to obstruct, including especially.
So that's partly why I didn't want to get rid of the filibuster, because enduring legislation is going to be enduring if more people vote for it. And if things are just around party lines and parties like 52-48 for every single vote, then there isn't reason to compromise, right? And compromise can be a good thing. But when you're using the filibuster in the way that Republicans have since around 2010, you're making it impossible for the Senate to even function. And that's good for Republicans. And the reason that's good for Republicans is because Republicans don't want to see the government do things. If the government isn't doing stuff, that's a win to them and to their base. Because the more, in their minds, the more things the government does, the more likelihood the government is to fuck up and cause damages to society and all that stuff. And so they have no incentive, especially now, to compromise with anybody. And so got to do something with this, right? You got to do something.
Obstruct civil rights and voting rights. And when it was used, senators traditionally used to have to stand and speak.
True.
At their desk.
That's what they should go back to, at least.
And sometimes it took hours. And when they sat down, if no one immediately stood up, anyone could call for a vote.
And the vote would happen.
Or the debate ended.
Yes, that's what should happen.
That doesn't happen today.
Nope.
Senators no longer even have to speak one word. Filibuster is not used by Republicans to bring the Senate together, but to pull it further apart. Filibuster is weaponized.
That's a good point, Independent Thought. Thank you for joining us from YouTube. So I'll go ahead and get this on the screen here really quick. Then don't compromise. The country elects a party to power. That party should be allowed to govern. 100% agree with you. My concern, and this is still a concern I have, is that I don't want to see Republicans play fuck games more so than they are, but actually get those into law. And so that would be my concern with that. I personally, for me, I would like to see the threshold lowered from 60 to 55 and a filibuster require, as Biden is saying here, for a person to actually take the floor, among other things. The reason why they change it to just a motion to filibust is more than likely because all of them are old and they can't stand there for the hours that it would take to filibuster. It's no more longer Mr. Smith goes to Washington, right? It's just you file a piece of paper, you register your protest with the Senate parliamentarian, and you're busting, and there's nothing that they can do to stop it other than try to hold a vote, and no one's going to do that, right? But if you're forcing your party to speak for hours on end, giving ammunition to people to say, look, this person is talking about green eggs and ham and not what is actually important to the bill. They don't have a substantive critique of this bill. Then I personally think that you would see less filibustering happening. But maybe I'm just an idealist. I don't know. You can let me know your thoughts on that.
And abused. While the state legislative assault on voting rights is simple, all you need in your House and Senate is a pure majority. In the United States Senate, it takes a supermajority, 60 votes, even to get a vote, instead of 50 to protect the right to vote. State legislators can pass anti-voting laws with simple majorities. If they can do that, then the United States Senate should be able to protect voting rights by a simple majority.
Hear, hear. Hear, hear.
Today, I'm making it clear, to protect our democracy, I support changing the Senate rules, whichever way they need to be changed to prevent.
The problem here is that Biden isn't using the stick against anybody. Maybe, I don't know, like,
when it comes to protecting majority,
like for Joe Manchin specifically, he does a lot of things that seems like out of spite, so you can't necessarily use the stick against him, especially within the position that he's in. But I feel like that still needs to be done, and it hasn't been done enough. Manchin is really dug in his heels against Bernie Sanders and progressives, specifically because they went to West Virginia to like protest his votes so far. And he's like, he basically like did the whole like politician used car salesman, shaking hands, posturing the person over into his bubble, and expressing dominance on them, and basically told Bernie, yeah, fuck you, buddy, live on national TV, and no one saw it. Like, I don't know, I mean, no one saw it, but a lot of people were like, oh, maybe there'll be like a compromise. Nah, he was telling him to fuck off. I shared that. Okay, let me get these on here. Let's see. I shared that concern with you up until earlier this year. I changed my view because I truly believe the country will rebuke laws that aren't helpful. This one? Yep. Oh, no, it's this one here. All right. Then the following party that comes into power will feel immense pressure to backtrack or amend pieces of legislation. I believe the end of the filibuster will only lead to less gridlock, which we desperately need. I think those are all fair points. Independent thought. I don't know. I don't see a. Maybe this is me piecemealing it and like what's the word? Where you staggered change or whatever the changes. I can't remember the phrase that everybody throws around that they really hate it. But maybe it's just me thinking like, hey, we haven't gone back to a filibuster that's actually a filibuster. Maybe we should try that first. Incremental change. That's the word I was looking for. So maybe that's my bias in that. But at the same time, like, I don't know. So, but I do know that Biden here isn't doing enough. He's not utilizing the bully pulpit in a way that could get these people on board. But also at the same time, maybe Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin are bought and paid for. So, but let's continue on the video.
Rule in America, the majority should rule in the United States Senate. I make this announcement with careful deliberation, recognizing the fundamental right to vote is a right from which all other rights flow. Good at working with senators my career, but man, the United States taking the filibuster has used 150. You know,
that was weird. Sorry about that.
Last year, if I'm not mistaken, the filibuster was used 154 times. The filibuster has been used to generate compromise in the past.
I guess that was the full video. Okay, well, enough of that. Let's get into the copy and talk a little bit more about this. So, according to The Hill, this past Monday, Majority Leader Schumer attempted to set up a simple majority vote on the election bills and legislation to bolster the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Schumer offered a trade-off. If Republicans allowed these two bills to be voted on by simple majority, Democrats would sign off on holding a simple majority votes on nearly 20 bills the Republicans placed on the Senate calendar. We Democrats aren't afraid of these votes, Schumer said from the Senate floor. So what I propose to the Republican leaders is that the Senate holds an up or down votes at a majority threshold of each of these Republican bills he has outlined tonight, as well as the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, Schumer said from the Senate floor. McConnell, however, rejected Schumer's offer without elaboration.
Votes in bipartisan.
Without elaboration. On the objection. Under the Senate's rules, any one senator can try to set up a vote or pass a bill, but because it requires a sign-off from the full Senate, any one senator can also object and block the request. Schumer is expected to force votes this week on the Freedom to Vote Act, which would overhaul the federal elections, and a separate voting legislation named after the late Representative John Lewis, Democrat of Georgia, that would strengthen the 1960 Voting Rights Act. But Republicans are set to use the 60-vote legislative filibuster to block those bills from advancing. Once that happens, Schumer has vowed to bring up changing the legislative filibuster by January 17th, bringing to a head months of behind-the-scenes negotiations among Democrats as they've tried to unify on rules changes. But even as Democrats bid to change the rules appears to be a long shot, Republicans are ramping up their pushback against the effort. McConnell and Schumer traded shots on the Senate floor earlier Monday. Hold on a second. Since Senator Schumer is hellbent on trying to break the Senate, Republicans will show how their reckless actions would have immediate consequences, McConnell said in a statement first reported by the Wall Street Journal. The bills that Republicans are making available for a vote include legislation on immigration, fracking, Cuba, President Biden's vaccine mandate, and limiting funding to school districts that don't have an in-person learning amid the coronavirus pandemic. But Schumer's office argued that by forcing Republicans to block votes on their own bills in exchange for allowing simple majority votes on the Democratic election bills, they were calling McConnell's bluff. Let's listen to McConnell talk about these bills.
How often the minority could demand lengthy debate. Our colleagues who are itching for a procedural nuclear winter have not even begun to contemplate how it would look. Our colleagues who are itching to drain every drop of collegiality from this body have not even begun to consider how that would work.
It's really funny to hear fuckface McConnell talk about the fact that Democrats are the ones are draining congeniality from the Senate floor when this piece of shit, during Obama's entire fucking presidency, instead of saying what we want to do is govern for the American people in the way that we believe is best, he said that their number one priority was to make sure that Obama was a one-term president. That's when this all started to go to shit. You can look at the filibusters that happened prior to Obama coming into office, and it was around 2006 or so that the rules for filibustering changed. So you had filibusters under the new rules for about 4 years prior to the Republicans taking back this, prior to Republicans having enough seats to break a 60 person threshold, and they just skyrocket. They just go through the roof under his leadership of the Republican Party in the Senate. And so anytime they're like, oh, the Democrats are the ones to blame, they're pretty much lying about this particular issue. They can be right about some other ones, but this one here, this one requiring 60 people to vote on anything, is largely a thing that was created by Republicans. And no lie, I'm not even lying about this. Like you can look this up. Like it stretches credulity on this. And so we really need to hold these people account, and specifically in regards to McConnell. Let's continue though.
If the Democratic leader tries to shut millions of Americans and entire states out of the business of governing, the operations of this body will change. Oh yeah.
Needs to change.
That much.
The Senate is broken.
It's true. But not in ways that reward the rule breakers. Not in ways that advantage this president, this majority, or their party.
Yeah, because that's all you care about, right?
I guarantee it.
All right. So that's McConnell's remarks on that subject. And so, yeah, you're just seeing what the next video is, but let's continue on here. So, I am so sorry that you. Hold on a second. Hold on. I'm sorry, that was gross. I'm congested from recovering from COVID or flu or whatever it was I had, and I'm sorry that happened on camera. But let's continue, like I said. So, bills sponsored by Democrats languished in the Senate for much of President Obama's tenure, as I've already stated. Obstruction from Republicans' side created what McConnell called the graveyard of the Democratic bills during Trump's 4 years in office, when McConnell referred to himself as the Grim Reaper. Under his leadership, hundreds of democratically sponsored bills never got to the floor for debate. That's not how the founders foresaw the Chamber of Congress working. What the Democrats want is to have the Senate actually work like it was designed to. So do Democrats want to break the Senate? Do they want to kill the filibuster? The answer is largely no. But despite the best efforts of the president and Democrats in Congress, there may not be moving the needle. And this is where we come into Senator Kyrsten Sinema. So there are reports that we're coming into Kyrsten Sinema saying that she is a firm no about changing the rules of the chamber.
Disease of division infecting our country. The debate over the Senate's 60-vote threshold shines a light on our broader challenges. There's no need for me to restate my long-standing support for the 60-vote threshold to pass legislation.
Is it just me, or is her voice breaking a little bit here, like she's nervous?
There's no need for me to restate its role protecting our country from wild reversals in federal policy.
Yes, wild reversals. Right, that was one of my concerns as well, but it might be bullshit.
Years serving in both the U.S. House and the Senate, and it is the view I continue to hold.
Yeah, sure it is. You're just bought and paid for. Let's be real. So, yeah. So continuing on. So there are reports that former President Clinton and own President Obama have called Senator Joe Manchin. Oprah Winfrey has called him too. But I guess we'll see if there's anyone out there that will still be calling Kyrsten Sinema to get her to change her mind about the filibuster. So that is the filibuster issues in a nutshell. So if you're just joining us, welcome. And this is the News Roundup. The News Roundup is done every Thursday from 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to roughly 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so that's what you're watching now. We also have a new podcast here on the lineup where we are calling Praxis Run. And Praxis Run is designed to interview people that have both done activist activity and have put their own they've done praxis, which is putting their own morality into practice. And so we're going to interview people from across the political spectrum in order to inform people on how best to do that. We have intent to interview both pro-life activists and pro-choice activists. We have intent to interview anti-racist activists, and among other people. So be sure to be on the lookout on this program. We will be announcing those shows here, hopefully within the next 3 or 4 months or so. We want to have a bench of shows built up before we actually start recording, and we're going to give them to y'all. Check in chat. Let's see. She sounds like she's competing for an Oscar. I don't know if it's so much that per se. I think that she might have just been nervous, but I don't know why she was nervous. So we'll have to see though, Nikki. We'll have to see. So coming also out of Congress is the Stock Act. Now, last December, Business Insider reported on Conflicted Congress, their investigation into legislature's compliance with the Stop Trading on Congressional Knowledge Act of 2012, otherwise known as the Stock Act. The Stock Act was designed and was signed into law by President Biden in 2012. Briefly, it prohibits members of Congress and employees of Congress from using private information derived from their official positions for personal benefit and for other purposes. The purpose of the bill was to bar members from using information garnered through their official business for personal reasons. The bill also applied to all employees in the executive and judicial branches of the federal government. The Stock Act requires every member of Congress to publicly file and disclose any financial transaction of stocks, bonds, commodities futures, and other securities within 45 days on their website, rather than a 1 year as was required previously. The act also requires members of Congress and the executive branch officials to disclose the terms of mortgages on their homes, prohibits them from receiving special access to initial public offering stocks, and denies federal pensions to members of Congress who are convicted of felonies involving public corruption. The reporting from Business Insider's 2021 investigation made clear that the Stock Act leaves much to be desired when it comes to consequences for legislators and staff who have violated its provisions. Dozens of members and at least 182 staffers have been tardy, but there's no consistent penalty system. Former staffers say there is a lack of enforcement against those who violate the Stock Act. No public record exists indicating whether these officials ever paid fines, and 19 lawmakers wouldn't answer questions from Insider about whether they paid a penalty. 10 other lawmakers said that they paid their fines, but they declined to provide proof, such as a receipt or canceled check. This lack of transparency makes it impossible to independently determine whether Stock Act lawbreakers truly face consequences, and if so, to what degree. It's a situation that ethics experts say leaves the public in the dark, lets Congress off the hook, and renders the Stock Act, intended to promote transparency, extinguish conflicts of interest, and defend against insider trading, toothless. It also shows Congress sets a lower standard for itself on financial conflict of interest matters than on other concerns. For example, consider that the House routinely issues automatic fines when members violate COVID-19 mask mandates and makes the information public. But when it comes to a member's personal finances, the House doesn't do a particularly good job of policing itself on a law it helped to write. In-depth reporting by Insider shows that neither chamber in Congress appears to take violation of the Stock Act seriously. Senate staffers who file their disclosures late receive an email from the lawmaker-led Senate Select Committee on Ethics telling them to pay the late fee or to apply for a waiver. Over in the House, members and senior staff who are late filing their stock trades do not receive email notifications alerting them to the issue. When Speaker Pelosi was questioned about the controversy, she replied that America is a free market system and members of Congress and staffers should not be prevented from using it. Others in Congress want to move to prevent trading altogether. So The Independent reported that Insider's investigation is likely to only fuel calls for members on both sides of the aisle, such as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who are opposed to members trading stocks for the practice to be banned outright. A Democrat-led bill joined by 2 Republicans that would do so was introduced in the House in early of 2021, but has seen no progress since it was introduced in March. Representative Ocasio-Cortez hammered the issue recently on Twitter, writing that it was absolutely ludicrous that members of Congress can hold and trade individual stocks while in office. The access influence that we should be exercised for the public interest, not our profit. It shouldn't be legal for us to trade individual stocks with the info that we have, tweeted the New York congresswoman. And according to USA Today, the latest this week is that on Monday, Richard Florida, the second highest official in the Federal Reserve, resigned over questionable trading activities early in the pandemic. Senator John Ossoff, Democrat of Georgia, is awaiting plans to introduce a bill barring members of Congress and their immediate families, which is a change to the Stock Act, individual stocks on the market, but it's awaiting bipartisan support from Republicans, according to a congressional aide familiar with the bill. Now, we can talk about this a little bit more in depth. So everybody knows that we have laws against insider trading, but those laws are pretty feckless. The coin of the realm still remains to be insider information. Somebody gets a hot tip about a particular company about to say, hey, we just made billions of dollars or something. They close a sweet deal and they're going to go trade on that before that information is released publicly. And this happens all the time. And partly the reason why you're seeing members of Congress say, we're not going to do that is because, well, they want in on the gift, man. They want to be in that sweet, sweet money spot of having the means to regulate and the knowledge of knowing what regulations are coming out in order to trade stocks and make profit from that. Now, it would be very hard, legally speaking, to bar members of a congressional that's a tongue tie, to ban their congressional members' families from also trading on their information or from trading in general, because you're not the congressperson, right? So but the reason that they want these rules in place is because no one trusts anybody to not tell like their brother, their sister, their like aunt from down the street, and cousin from the twice removed from the fifth side across the tracks, from what information is going to be pertinent to an important stock or important company. And we saw a lot of this during COVID when senators bought and sold individual stocks or changed their portfolio around the idea of their secret briefings from intelligence agencies as well as Health and Human Services commissions. So yeah, it's pretty bad that this is a thing that can happen. And personally, I would like to see that members of Congress get blind trust that they can't talk to anybody about, that is managed by a government agent. And that government agent is basically charged with managing the trust, similar to like a TSP. That is the thrift savings plan that members of the armed services get access to, and the like. And so I don't see anything wrong with that. What I do see, though, is that there is the potential that if you remove this type of thrift or corruption, let's call it corruption. If you do remove this type of corruption, it will simply be replaced by other types of corruption, such as lobbying corruption, because it means that members of Congress can't make as much money as they could otherwise. So we have to be very cautious here if we're going to supplant one type of corruption for something that's worse. So this is one of those situations where I'm just going to say it: pay Congress members more money. Actually pay everybody in the federal government more money. Why do I say that? Well, because if you work in the private sector after leaving Congress, you're going to make about, 3 times the amount of money that you're making now, doing not even the same difficult of a job, right? Being a lobbyist or something. And it's an issue that we see in the SEC, the IRS, and other regulatory bodies, that they can make more money in the private sector than they can in the government sector. And this goes back to like, well, a person that works for the government should be proud that they are helping the American people, and that's why they're in there, and they don't really need to make money. But that's not what's going on, everybody. I think everybody can agree that the amount of money that that money is a very big driver about why people do certain jobs, even in the government. Benefits being another thing that we see here. And so if we paid people more money, there's less likelihood of corruption, because you're already making, $400,000 a year. That would be way too much. But $400,000 a year, why would you be corrupt for another 100,000, right? Like, you're already set. It's that kind of thinking, right? So I think that's something that we should pay attention to. Now, we have more information coming about the January 6th investigation here, and this will mark our first twice monthly reporting on the Capitol riots and the information coming out therein. For nearly all of last year, the Roundup spent little time reporting news that involved the former president. But reporting the events that led up to last year's Capitol riot is vital to our understanding of just how close we came to having 2020's fair and fair election overturned. And former President Trump and his allies tried very hard to make that happen. In this first segment, we'll bring with an update on the progress made by the House Select Committee formed to investigate the January 6th insurrection and cover some breaking news in the ongoing DOJ investigation. So the following is compiled from ABC News, CNBC News, and Just Security. In the roughly 6 months since the committee began its work, more than 40 full-time investigators from both political parties have been working behind closed doors, sometimes making multiple depositions in a single day. The Select Committee has interviewed or deposed over 300 witnesses and have obtained over 30,000 records. The vast majority of witnesses identified by the Select Committee have cooperated, without the committee even needing to issue a formal subpoena. When necessary, the Select Committee has taken appropriate and decisive steps to compel testimony. It has issued 52 subpoenas for records and testimony in the last several months. The team of investigators are divided into color-coded teams focused on different aspects of their investigation. The Green Team is investigating the money trail from GOP donors and supporters to Trump's campaign and groups that vowed to fight the results of the 2020 election. The Red Team is investigating the quote-unquote Stop the Steal movement. Gold and Purple teams are digging into Trump's coordination with GOP lawmakers to overturn the election results, and the involvement of extremist groups, including the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers, in the attack on Capitol Hill. Experts and sources familiar with the inquiry believe that one of the committee's greatest challenges will be presenting its findings in a way that will resonate with the American people. To that end, the committee is preparing for a series of prime-time hearings in the coming weeks. Chairman Bernie Thompson, Democrat of Mississippi, told NBC News that the hearings will focus on how the election was carried out in key states, and that testimony from local officials could help dispel some of the unfounded claims of widespread vote election fraud by Trump and his supporters. What we will do in our hearings is put the pieces of the puzzle together so that the average man and woman on the street will understand how close we came to losing our democracy by a violent overthrow of the American citizens attacking our government, he said. Now, the DOJ is also investigating these issues. The DOJ's investigation of the invasion has now grown into the largest criminal probe in U.S. history, and its work is far from over. And the numbers are staggering. In 1 year, the government has arrested and charged more than 725 people in connection with the riot. More than 325 of them were charged with felonies, including many for assaulting officers or corruptly trying to obstruct Congress's official proceedings. 10 were charged with assaulting members of the media by destroying their equipment. The FBI is still trying to identify more than 350 people that it believes committed violent acts at the Capitol. Let's go ahead and let's go ahead and watch some of the remarks from Attorney General Merrick Garland.
The actions we have taken thus far will not be our last. The Justice Department remains committed to holding all January 6 perpetrators at any level accountable under law, whether they were present that day or were otherwise criminally responsible for the assault on our democracy. We will follow the facts wherever they lead.
Yes, they will. Yes, they will. All right. So, continuing on here. So the scope of the DOJ investigation is unprecedented, involving personnel from nearly every FBI field office and U.S. Attorney's office across the country. The agency has issued more than 5,000 subpoenas and search warrants, seized about 2,000 devices, and sifted through about 15 terabytes of data. Or terabytes? That's not as much as one would think, of data, and more than 300,000 tips from the public. Now, breaking as of today, though, the Justice Department has brought sedition and conspiracy charges. This is where we get to the level of insurrection against 11 defendants, including the leader of the Oath Keepers, Stuart Rhodes. The bringing of these charges removes any sense that the prosecutors believe the riot emerged from just a group of overzealous protesters. The new indictment brings to light the planning the Oath Keepers allegedly did ahead of the Capitol attack. They allegedly recruited members, stocked up on weapons, and organized to disrupt Congress' certification of the 2020 election. Prosecutors say that they also continue to plot to oppose by force the lawful transfer of presidential power after the Capitol riot failed to block the electoral college vote. Prosecutors allege that on January 6th, Oath Keepers stationed themselves around the D.C. area. Some were near the Capitol, others provided security, and a third group waited across the river in Virginia, in a Virginia hotel with a cache of weapons. At the Capitol, some members moved in a military stack formation into the Capitol, where they fought with police, and a small group unsuccessfully looked for House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, according to court documents. The plotting didn't end with the Capitol riot. Prosecutors say the plotting didn't end with the Capitol riot. Prosecutors say, alleging Rhodes and other co-conspirators met in Virginia to celebrate the attack and discuss next steps. In a Signal chat, which is similar to Telegram, and it's another anti-spying kind of chat system that was at one time really liked by a lot of leftists, to chat to other members of Oath Keeper leaders. Rhodes allegedly said that patriots entering their own capital to send a message to traitors is nothing compared to what's coming. In 2 weeks, the Roundup will report on the efforts of the former president and members of his administration and his allies in Congress to overturn the results of the 2020 election. Now, what people might not know about the Oath Keepers specifically is that the Oath Keepers were formed under President Obama. And Oath Keepers are, they like to say that they are the backbone defending America from enemies on the domestic front. And their cause du jour, or at least since its founding, has been centered around Second Amendment rights protection. And they believe in things like the preclusion doctrine. I don't remember the exact thing, but it's where a state can say preemption. That's what they say. They believe in like the preemption doctrine. They believe in like the super sheriff, that the sheriff can choose to enforce or not enforce laws that they believe are unconstitutional. And they're really, really about like saying the federal government can't do anything around guns. From my cold dead hands is like a thing that they very much follow. Now, yours truly, back when they were first starting off, it was actually kind of interested in what they were having to say. This was the nascent group that became the Oath Keepers. We're talking like the Rhodes set up a forum. Some like-minded people went over there and started talking about stuff. And I was looking for information. And during my search of this information and looking at different groups that me and my dumbness was wanting to join, I came across Oath Keepers and like some other groups. And one of the things that turned me off from them is the amount of honestly like what I saw at the time to be pretty racist. I can't remember specifics. This is talking like 2009 timeframe, so that was a really long time ago. It's over a decade. But that was the impression that I was left with, that a lot of the people were really against Obama for things that weren't true. It wasn't just about protecting the Second Amendment, but it was fears around things like black people looking for revenge, Muslims, immigration, the kind of stuff that is now what makes up a large portion of Republicans' talking points. And so I was like, not for me, dog. That's a no. That's a no for me. And it seems like I was right with everything that's happened so far. And Rhodes has become more militant in his direction and thinking over the years, and was probably extra radicalized by two events. First, the Black Lives Matter protest. Oath Keepers actually went and provided security for Alex Jones when he attended a protest. I think that was one he attended was in Missouri, or at least Prison Planet, his news fucking program, was there, and they were trying to provide security for that. And also COVID-19 lockdowns. And so we need to keep an eye on the people that are joining militant groups. I don't care if they're right-wing or left-wing militant groups. Those people would be the quote-unquote vanguard of any type of, for lack of a better term, revolution that would happen. And they typically have some fucked up beliefs. And so it is, in my opinion, with perfectly within police and FBI authority to keep tabs. This isn't to say like do entrapment on them or anything like that, but infiltrate and disrupt these organizations, prevent them from actually doing anything that is batshit, like burning down courthouses or blowing up federal buildings, things that we saw in the 90s, right? So I don't have a problem with that. You can say egg cab all you want, but I do want law enforcement to keep tabs on people like this, because people like this tend to be dangerous, not just bluster all the time, as you can see here. And one of the things is that a lot of people don't know or weren't realizing is that groups were putting weapon caches around DC in as a means to have a place to grab weapons should anything pop off more than it did. So that's just to tell you. Now, to follow up, from that, we're going to talk about some of the domestic terrorism that has been a priority for the Department of Justice. Now, according to PBS News, the Justice Department is establishing a specialized unit focused on domestic terrorism to fight back against an elevated threat from the violent extremists in the United States. In testimony before Congress this week, Assistant Attorney General Matthew Olsen said the number of FBI investigations into suspected domestic violent extremists has more than doubled since the spring of 2020. We have seen a growing threat from those who are motivated by racial animus, as well as those who subscribe to extremist, anti-government, and anti-authority ideologies. And this is a thing that happens like clockwork every time a Democrat comes into office, and has happened since the 1990s. So, obviously, right, this is a pattern. Anytime a Democrat takes control of the presidency, militia groups grow in numbers, and they tend to get a little more violent. Olsen's assessment tracked with warnings last March from FBI Director Christopher Wray, who testified that the threat was metastasizing. The department's National Security Division, which Olsen leads, has a counterterrorism section. But Olsen told the Senate Judiciary Committee that he had decided to create a specialized domestic terrorism unit to augment our existing approach and to ensure that these cases are properly handled and effectively coordinated across the country. The formation of a new unit underscores the extent to which domestic violence extremism. The officials said that the department treats domestic extremist violence the same regardless of ideology. Now, one of the things that is... Hold on a second. I don't know if you guys could hear that, but it was driving me nuts. My dog was scratching up a storm behind me. And so anyways, so as I was saying, Republicans, especially with like Turning Points USA and some other groups, are saying that this is an effort to criminalize Republican activity. And they're going to use this sort of task force to say they're coming for you, the regular old Republicans, to radicalize them further and entrench them against Democrats in general in an us versus them mentality, and to ensure that their voters don't leave their base. Because if you believe somebody is coming after you, chances are you're going to rally around the people that say they will protect you. And so that's the kind of things that we'll see. Let's see. Well, who is that? Who just followed? Was that Joe McCarthy? Joe McCarthy II is now a sorcerer. Well, thanks for following. Appreciate it. Now, what I was saying is that don't be surprised if you hear this as a talking point from a lot of Republicans and conservatives, especially on Twitch and Twitter, because this is what they've been saying for months. And now that we have a task force in place that's seemingly to go after people of a particular extremist bent, they're going to use this as a way to say, I told you so. You need to arm up and you need to fight back. And it's going to raise the stakes of the rhetoric is going to raise the stakes for something bad to happen. And it's sad that that's the case. It really is. So we need to pay attention to this. We need to do our due diligence. We need to do what we ourselves need to do, is to tamp down on that rhetoric ourselves. So we shouldn't be like, fuck them Republicans, those terrorist assholes. We shouldn't say things like that. We should be hyper narrow. We should be very narrow on who we label these extremist groups and who we don't. So I personally think that if you're in a militia, you're probably a little sussy. But we need to remember that being in a militia isn't illegal, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to take up arms against the government tomorrow and, try to kill people. So we need to be very conscious of our words in an effort to tamp down on the vitriol, which will hopefully dissuade people from actually doing anything crazy. So that's what's going on with the January 6th investigation and extremism in general. Let's move on to state politics. Coming out of New Jersey, the response to this is coming out of New Jersey. So the response to the perceived willingness of the SCOTUS to change Roe v. Wade has led to some states taking steps to protect women's right to choose. New Jersey is one of those states. New Jersey's Congress passed a bill this week that enshrines the right of women and girls to access reproductive health care. The bill now goes to Governor Phil Murphy for his signature. According to NewJersey.com, as numerous Assembly Republicans spoke at length about the need to choose life over abortion, Assemblywoman Mila Jassy, Democrat from Essex, one of the prime sponsors, said with exasperation, "I encourage my colleagues to move into 2022 and give us the right to determine when and whether we wish to reproduce." Okay, that's it. The Assembly also approved a bill, Senate 413, that would require authorization and coverage of 12 months of contraceptive coverage. The bill, which previously passed the Senate, awaits Murphy's signature. Quote, "When the governor signs both of these bills into law, many New Jerseyans will have increased access to birth control and a state law protecting their right to access abortion and birth control," she said. "We celebrate this, but the work is far from done." Now, but the midterms are coming, and they're coming at you fast. We already have gearing up for primary elections in a slew of states for the different parties. So let's get talking about that now. Now, the challenge filed against Madison Cawthorn's candidacy is the first in which will likely be many such actions in the coming weeks and months. Advocacy groups have said that they intend to use the 14th Amendment in an effort to prevent those who deny the outcome of the 2020 presidential election and candidates who were involved in the lead up to the January 6th insurrection from winning office. The midterm elections are coming, and this and more is heating up. Several Republican-led states have passed election laws designed to suppress the vote of people who typically vote for Democrats. Some of those states passed laws that would allow them to ignore the popular vote count entirely. The 2020 census led to the redrawing of new district maps that affect where people vote, and in some cases, gerrymander maps made a big difference. Politicians have declared their candidacy. It's a lot of information, and it's all important. So beginning next Tuesday, the Roundup will launch a new twice-monthly segment that's all about elections, where we'll cover the following: states where redistricting and election laws have affected voters where you live, how to make sure your votes are counted in states where stricter voting laws have been passed, an ongoing overview of the candidates and their campaigns, and every other thing about voting elections. So be sure to stay tuned to the News Roundup for that kind of information. Now, we have some sad news today. All right. This is going to be, this might get us blacked from YouTube because I'm going to rant. So the Supreme Court issued rulings today on President Biden's vax or mask mandates, right? And it was a split decision between them. So let's talk about it. As reported last week, SCOTUS on Friday had heard arguments regarding two cases about president's vaccine mandates. The decisions on both of those cases came down late this afternoon. One case was about the mandate for employers of more than 100 people, which resulted in an emergency ruling by OSHA. In a 6-3 ruling, the SCOTUS blocked that mandate. The liberal members of the court dissented in that opinion. The other was related to healthcare workers in facilities that care for patients who are on Medicare and Medicaid. The mandate for that case was that all employees must be vaccinated because they deal with patients who are elderly, disabled, and poor, three groups that are at specific risk of hospitalization and death. The court's decision in that case was to uphold the mandate. The vote in the healthcare case was 5-4, with Justice John G. Roberts Jr. and Justice Brett M. Kavanaugh joining the liberal justices to form a majority. Now, you've heard me say on this program before that a lot of these decisions that we're going to see that might break from the Republican bent are either going to come down to weird, wonky decisions by Thomas around race relations and things like that, or Brett Kavanaugh. And the reason, and to a lesser extent, sometimes Gorsuch. Now, Now, we already know Thompson's thing, right? It's that he is very aware of how things impact Black people specifically, and he sometimes rules in a more liberal way because of that, but not very often. He's more of a Thomas Swalwell kind of figure in that regard. Now, the reason that Gorsuch and Kavanaugh are the actual kingmakers in these decisions, so to speak, is because they are pragmatic to a degree, but in different instances. So now, why do I say that? So in this particular case, right, the six court majority ruled against the employer mandate. The employer mandate here was along the lines of how employers need to protect their employees, and whether or not the emergency ruling was something that only impacted employment. Now, Gorsuch is a libertarian, well, through and through. If it's going to negatively impact businesses and he can wrangle his way around it not impacting business, in a way to where businesses come out on top, he's going to do that. I mean, this is a man that had a ruling about a person being held civilly liable for leaving his trailer on the side of the road after his brakes froze out and his heat stopped. And he called his employer for assistance, and the employer said, you got to wait until tomorrow, and you can't leave your truck in freezing weather, right? What did he do? He left his truck so he could survive. Like, if he stayed in that truck that night, he probably would have died, right? And Gorsuch said, well, tough cookies, dude. You deserve to lose your job, and you have to pay your job for the lost time. I'm like, what the fuck, dude? Like, that's some fucking libertarian bullshit, man. All right. So that's what Gorsuch is going to always do. But with Kavanaugh, he's a little bit more pragmatic on these kind of things, okay? And Kavanaugh saw the employer mandate as being overly broad because it doesn't just impact employers. And he was a little wishy-washy about the whole vaccine thing, right? But when it came to Health and Human Services and their requirement, he saw an opening to allow it to pass. And it's the same opening that Roberts saw. There's two things here with that. There's the power of the purse strings and the practicality of it. Now, the practicality of it was specifically mentioned in the ruling. And I'm going to read, if I can find it quickly, I'm going to read the specifics passage from the majority opinion about the healthcare mandate. And here it is. So this is a quote, and it's kind of like in the middle of the passage, but it will make sense. One such function, that function being where it is a clear mandate, perhaps the most basic, given the department's core mission, department being here to the Health and Human Services, is to ensure that the healthcare providers who care for Medicare and Medicaid patients protect their patients' health and safety. Such providers include hospitals, nursing homes, ambulatory surgical centers, hospices, rehabilitation facilities, and more. To that end, Congress authorized the Secretary to promulgate, as a condition of a facility's participation in the programs being the HSS being able to give money, such quote requirements as they find necessary in the interest of health and safety of individuals who are furnished response services in the institution. And then there's a list of laws that go into that effect. And because HHS's entire existence is around protecting people's health, well, of course they get a say in it, right? So yeah, it's one of those situations where Roberts and Roberts and Kavanaugh came together and ruled with the liberals to make a 5-4 split decision. And that will probably have more staying power and more precedent and more stare decisis going forward because of that. But they were not going to do that with the employers because, well, fuck you. That's why. So yeah, we got some comments in the chat. So let me go ahead and get some of these on here. So, let's see. Wait, isn't OSHA supposed to be about directly employment related safety, not just broad safety issues that are separate from employers? Yes. And that was their reasoning for this, ruling. Now, to me, this comes into an emergency situation And I think that the fact that they had a vax or mask and test thing, I think that they actually upheld that, because while at work, you are exposing other people to this virus, and therefore it becomes an occupational hazard. It's not just OSHA only regulates direct occupational hazards, but it like direct as in what is pertaining to just the job you're doing. For example, like being a machinist or something like that. But occupational safety in general. And so I think that this actually should have been upheld, but that was the reason that they had it. And then to your second comment, so like for hospitals have valid because guests, not nurses and doctors, but patients, has no option in its use, but that's not true in person of most workplaces for employees. Yeah, I guess that's true as well. But my rant is going to come into this because during the debate, the justices were pushing forward anti-vax propaganda. This was specifically true with Alito. Alito was like, I don't want anybody to misunderstand me. I don't want anybody to misunderstand me. While he ranted off about like, well, what about virus data? Why are you going to try to put some substance to my body that I don't know? Like, didn't they not have have to reveal what's in those vaccines? Like, it was a lot of bullshit. Okay. And the liberal justices during this situation were like, right, the entire fucking time. I mean, they were being very more reserved than that, of course, but they had to spend a lot of time rebutting just basic facts about COVID and vaccines. And that just shows you how much bullshit is out there, that it infects even the fucking Supreme Court of the United States. It makes you want to tear your hair out, man. You know, I was at one point a free speech absolutist. I am absolutely not that anymore. I don't know what I am. I still support free speech. I don't want the government necessarily being involved in regulation of speech directly, but the amount of misinformation that is out there about public safety and public health is causing people to die. There is no way to quibble about that. People are dying because they believe wrong information. Right, but okay, so more comments from Quibbles Over Coffee. And Quibbles, if you want to come on and directly ask me, I can hop into to Discord really quick if you'd like. So we don't have to do this back and forth. But let's see. Right, but this isn't occupational safety, it's just safety writ large, which means it's left to the states. No, I would say no, specifically because it's talking about what to do in terms of work. And in the work environment, what they were saying is, hey, if you're vaccinated, great, you're protected, right? If you're not vaccinated, then you have to test and you got to wear a mask to protect other people while in the workplace. It was specifically around working. So I don't think that's the case. At least personally, the justices disagreed, but I think the justices are full of shit. Focus is this as though it's only about COVID is the job of legislatures, not the courts. Yeah, for sure. Give me like 10 minutes. I'd be happy to. Okay. Yeah. So I can go ahead and hop on in that. In the meantime, I'm going to continue with the news. All right. So that's what we have with the vaccine mandate or test or vax or test regimen. So let's move on to other news. So CNN has reported on immigration that refugee admissions to the U.S. will restart this week after a temporary freeze put in place last year to focus on resettlement of Afghan refugees following the U.S. military withdrawal from Afghanistan. We at this program raised a total of around $110 or so for Refugee Services of Texas, which has been on the forefront of resettling Afghan refugees. So thank you all for that. If you showed up to the charity stream and donated, we really appreciate it. But continuing on, about 55,000 Afghans have been resettled nationwide. Around 20,500 people remain at domestic military bases as of January 6th, an influx that taxed an already overwhelmed resettlement system. In recent months, refugees advocates and resettlement offices have been able to recruit low staff members, and bolster volunteers to process more people. Now, refugees from around the world who have already undergone processing and checks will once again be allowed to come to the United States. As of November 30th, more than 2,000 refugees had been resettled in the U.S. in the new fiscal year. The refugee cap for the fiscal year of 2022 is $125,000. I'm sorry, people. People, they aren't dollars, they're people. So, yeah, let's continue on. So, you know us, we like to talk about different technology stuff coming up, and you've seen me probably on Twitter. Speaking of, hey, you know what? You know what you should do? You know what you need to do? You know what you need to do? You need to follow us on Twitter, all right? Follow us on Crowdsourced Poll at Crowdsourced Poll on Twitter, and find the memes that I share because they're fucking hilarious. And I give you some decent insights every once in a while on Twitter, despite the character limit. So yeah, follow us on Twitter. But if you do follow me on Twitter, you already know that I've been talking about NFTs. All right. Now, I think NFTs are mostly another art scam used to launder and embezzle money from around the world and wash that shit clean. Whatever. Now, there's a really cool things that are being done with NFTs. Like Beeple, he's got the first child of the metaverse that he's gonna update and age as things go along, and that's kind of cool. And that can really be done like ownership wise with a thing that makes it to where like a certificate of authenticity, which is what a lot of NFTs are. And so that's cool, right? And then there's also this there's like collectible cards, and that's another way that NFTs can work. And hold on a second. And collectible digital cards is another way for an NFT to actually exist and make money. But these monkeys, these stupid ass monkey fucking NFTs. There's oh my god, can I put that on stream? Do I dare risk it? Hold on, I might risk it. All right, I'm going to do it. I'm doing it. I don't care. We're doing it. We're doing it live. We're doing it live. All right. All right. If I get no, this is gonna ban me. All right. Never mind. It's too graphic. It's too graphic. But there's people that have made testicle NFT art, and they're trying to make millions of dollars off this shit, and it's working because a lot of people need to launder money, and a lot of people are jumping on the bandwagon thinking they're going to be able to make a ton of money, and it's really, really sad. Like, I'm not going to knock anybody for like buying an NFT because they like cool collectibles and like digital art and stuff like that. I think that is one area where an NFT could actually shine, and I think it's cool. Like Top Shot, the basketball cards, the digital basketball cards that is from the same people that made CryptoKitties, which is also an NFT, by the way, is kind of cool. Like I've bought a couple of packs of Top Shot just to see what it is. Gamble. It was gambling on my end. I mean, I made money. I made almost $1,000, so that was cool. But yeah, so this is a thing for like nerds and collectors across the entire spectrum, sports, memorabilia, or whatever, as a way to bring that collection to the digital age. And as long as they're being made on a chain that isn't energy intensive, I don't see really much harm in it. I think it's less environmentally damaging on these low impact chains than, you know, possibly actually printing off a physical thing. But with that said, not everyone is doing that, and a lot of NFTs are on chains that are pretty energy intensive still, and so it needs to come into its own and get off proof of work, which is where all the mining comes from, and get on a proof of stake, which is very low overhead. Oh, Discord link. 1 second. I mean, you're friends with me on Discord, right? You can probably just call me. But let me get through this NFT story real quick. So, but because this is such a huge chain, this is such a huge bandwagon with NFTs, even the Associated Press is getting on the bandwagon. Yes, you heard it right, folks. The Associated Press is selling historical images that it's taken, photos, and making them into NFTs. Let's talk about it. So the crypto market may be catering, but that hasn't stopped the action on NFT land. With volume surging, the Associated Press will launch an NFT marketplace to showcase its library of historic photos, and it will do so on a system built on a blockchain provider by Zoa, that is XOOA. The move underscores the unflagging investment by mainstream media entertainment and sports interest in non-fungible tokens. The marketplace is set to launch on January 31st. AP's initial collection will be released over several weeks, with NFTs minted on the Polygon blockchain to minimize transaction fees. Now, with minting, that means that they're being created. So they're assigning a computer hash algorithm, or a computer hash rather, to a particular image, and they're linking the two, and that's minting it. And there's going to be limited runs on these things, so be sure to get your tax-the-rich collectible trading card, everybody. I fucking can't. Like, if anybody in the face of the planet was going to collect political memorabilia from an NFT, it would be me, but I can't take this seriously. Now, if it's cheap, if we're talking like, a couple bucks, I might buy some. Not because I want to make money from it, but I like owning cool shit, and sometimes this is cool shit. Let's talk more about this. Now, proceeds from NFTs sold will be used to fund AP journalism, which is another reason why I would actually be okay buying this, with the photographers who created the images also receiving a share of the revenue. AP's collection will host a selection of digitally enhanced images from across the 176-year history, including several photographs that have received the Pulitzer Prize. The NFTs tackle subjects ranging from war to space exploration to climate change, and highlights bodies of work from AP photographers. Pulitzer Drops. So a drop is when you release the NFT into the world, and you gotta buy it quick because they're limited, right? FOMO. Everybody's exploding FOMO on this, but like, they're calling Pulitzer Drops. Come on, you can't tell me this shit isn't funny. So, are expected to place within fortnightly intervals, every 2 weeks. The NFTs will feature unique metadata detailing the context surrounding each image, including time, date, location information, along the equipment and technical settings that were used to capture the photo. That's cool, not gonna lie. Now, the marketplace will also allow collectors to both purchase NFTs and conduct secondary sales, because we can't have an NFT without having a capitalistic marketplace, everybody. Supporting payments via credit card or third-party wallet providers, including MetaMask, Footmatic, and Coinbase. MetaMask is a popular token and Ethereum wallet. Coinbase being the broker and being the largest broker. So they want your crypto too. Reselling the NFTs will incur a 10% fee, which is split between Zoa and the AP. And hopefully the photographer that took the image in the first place. AP is not the first journalism company to embrace NFTs, with Quartz claiming to have sold the first tokenized news article for $1,800 in March of 2021. The New York Times and CNN similarly tested the NFT waters. AP sold its first non-fungible token in September for $180. The token is a one-of-a-kind and features a digital artwork depicting the Electoral College result maps from the 2020 US presidential election. AP also published the election's results to the Ethereum and EOS blockchains. Chainlink also launched its own Chainlink Oracle node in October of 2021. And I think Chainlink is IBM, right? So it's just Chainlink IBM. IBM's. Hold on, let me look at this. IBM Chainlink. I think Chainlink is IBM's. Yep. Develop. Hold on. Chainlink. Sergey Chainlink link. Okay, well, I'm probably wrong about that. IBM has its own blockchain, so that's funny, right? What's the link to your Discord? Never mind, found it. So you're sitting in there. Okay. Hey, Quibbles. Give me 1 second. Let's see if I can.
You can hear me, right?
Yeah, I can hear you. Are you wanting to be on camera or not?
Oh, I can be. Sure. Give me a second.
That's up to you.
Give me a second. Here we are. Hi.
Oh, I need to do it this way. This is gonna suck. All right, you're gonna see my green screen, everybody. So that's fine. Discord video. Oh,
It's been a while. How are you?
It's been a minute. It has been a minute. Give me 1 second while I reconfigure this. And then sorry everybody, I haven't done this in a minute, so I got to bam, and then bam. Oh wait, it didn't. Hold on. Oh, they changed it on me.
What did they do?
So there's this theme mod you can get for Discord that allows you to change the background color, and I was able to actually green screen out the background for Discord, so I could use my own background. But they changed it on me. They changed the way it worked. I'm gonna jump out real quick and come back in. Hold on. Yep, they changed it.
That's so upsetting. I'm sorry.
It is, because it is upsetting. But okay, we'll just do it this way. So how you been?
I've been good. Yeah, it's I'm about to start working for Habitat for Humanity.
Good.
You're doing a bunch of like charity stuff, right? You did like a stream that got a bunch of money, right?
Yeah, so the first charity stream actually ended up raising $1,400, which was fantastic.
That's awesome.
This last one raised 110. One person donated directly to the charity, and other people donated to us. So we ended up just recycling it and just putting it into the charity directly. And so we're going to be doing that quarterly. So should have another one happening in like March timeframe or so. And then one again in like July or August. So yeah.
Yeah, good for you. That's awesome.
Thanks.
Interesting. Okay, so let's talk about the court case.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's talk about court case a little bit.
Okay. So, the first thing is that like the Department of Labor is not the only level of like public health that exists, right? Like the state is supposed to have like a broad control over certain things, right?
I mean, federally, sure. If you want to go that route, yeah.
Well, my point is that like the federal is not the only component that is
right.
relevant. Like you don't only have to look at the federal level. You can have these decisions being made at a statewide level, right?
Right. You can.
So I guess my concern is that like I should get something out of the way. Like to clarify, I'm absolutely pro-vax. Like you should absolutely get vaccinated. Everyone should be vaccinated for sure. But like in terms of the precedent, I don't think it's crazy when they're talking about the difference between broad public health measures versus safety standards for the workplace, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And so I guess my concern is that like this isn't something that has to do specifically with the workplace. It's just something that affects you while in the workplace, but affects you broadly across all of life.
I mean, true. I mean, that was the, like I said in response to your initial. Am I lagging for you, or moving weird or something?
You're not lagging, but the sound is a little bit like weird. There's like a little underneath it, which I don't know why.
Weird. Okay.
Yeah, I couldn't hear it when I was watching the stream, but
okay.
Now that I'm talking to you, I can hear it. But that's fine. Whatever.
Okay. Yeah. So that was the Supreme Court's figure on that as well. And I think it's a fair critique, but I also feel like that's where the mask mandate thing comes in from, and the Supreme Court didn't care about that. When it's just employers doing it. So Supreme Court's like, if an employer wants to fire you because you're not vaccinated, that's fine. So I'm like, is that really your reasoning, or you just don't want the federal government telling employers what to do?
Well, right? I mean, like there is a difference between like to be clear, like yes, the company can make these decisions, but also the statewide can make the decisions. It's not that like government has no standing in this. Sure. It's a matter of whether or not federal government has a standing in it. Which I think is a separate question.
If the federal government has already the ability to regulate businesses within states, even if the business doesn't go across state lines, I don't see how this is different.
Well, because this isn't just strictly to do with like the reason that they're doing this is a backdoor. The reason that the Biden administration is trying to do this is they're trying to do a backdoor, recognizing
right, because of that like tweet, right?
Say it again.
Because of that tweet, right? There was a tweet that like somebody either quote tweeted or liked, and it was like, it's a back door. And so the justice was like, haha, we caught you. Some journalist said something about like,
but like
they brought it up in the thing. I'm like,
I don't know about the I don't know about
the
tweet.
You're
like,
really say a liked tweet or a retweet is the government sanctioning like this person? Come on, dude.
Right, but I think that like the broad point is a fair one, whether or not like the particular point, the way that they like made elucidated the point was somewhat joking in the context of the courtroom, because like they're able to just sort of like they make jokes sometimes, right? Particularly if we're talking.
Oh no, they're dead serious about this one.
No, I know, but like the underlying message is serious. But you can make an underlying message that's valid in a somewhat sort of ribbing kind of way, if that makes sense, in a courtroom in this context. But the underlying point is that like everyone in the entire country, basically the vast majority of people in the country, have to work, right? And so because we all work, it is a concern, I think a valid one, that like if we just allow anything that we can say is even remotely health related, if it's not to do specifically with a matter of safety standards for the workplace, it's just broad safety standards writ large that have nothing to do with a workplace. That does scare me, because that would mean that, go for it.
Yeah, when you say nothing to do with the workplace, are you saying that's because it's not in direct relation to the person's particular job? Is that why you're saying this? So them being at work doesn't necessarily, to you, warrant the federal government or maybe even sometimes state government from stepping in saying, hey, you need to protect people in this environment.
Yes, I mean, the equivalent example would be, let's say you're working on a job site, on like a construction site. If there aren't rules and regulations around like hard hats, right, that is a safety standard that has to do specifically with you're likely to get hit in the head by a hammer, and that getting hit in the hammer has to do specifically with your job on the construction site. Okay. And therefore, like that's something to do with just that. It's not going to happen outside of work. But that's different than, let's say, like, I'm trying to think of another example that's not vaccine related. Maybe an example could be like if someone is, here's an example. So marijuana, right? Like marijuana is federally illegal because it's considered federally, they're wrong, but federally it's considered to be a health hazard, right? Broadly speaking. And so like if you said that it's like you must, as a employer, check everyone. You need to have testing on every single person who comes in the door on whether or not they have marijuana, and you must fire them if they do have marijuana in their system. Right? That's an example of something that is not a safety standard in relation to the workforce. You're using it as a way of getting around the fact that nationally you can't mandate that everyone be checked for marijuana.
Yeah, but I don't see that being the same case here, specifically because we have the testing or the mask requirement, and that is to reduce the exposure of people in the workplace to those that aren't at least as protected as anybody else. So that's why I don't necessarily see.
I don't think that as a precedent is relevant.
I'm saying again,
I don't think that the fact that there's a mask option is relevant to the case, because the case is about precedent. The case is not about the individual. Like if we're asking like whether or not as a congressman, as a senator, right? If you're just thinking about like what's actually reasonable legislation that will benefit the country, the mask component is an important component of it, and that should change people's thinking. But in terms of the court's job, which is precedent, I don't think that that's relevant at all, because wouldn't the precedent, because of the mask or test regimen, mean that they're not putting in a precedent to actually force vaccines on people? And they're that's what I'm getting at. I don't see how the precedent argument is not that it's not pertinent, but I don't see how your issues are not assuaged. What I should say. Yeah, so let's stick with the marijuana example. So let's say that if you choose not to get tested for marijuana in your system, you can also choose to work from home. Okay. Is that good enough for you? Is that therefore okay to have the marijuana check coming into the door?
Mm. No, that's a good point. Okay. I mean, I think you've made a good point about that. So I'd have to think about it more. I don't want to say one way or the other right now, but
yeah, that's fair.
It's definitely got my brain turning in that regard. I don't know. Maybe I'm just more comfortable with allowing temporary emergency decisions to be made, because I don't think it's going to become a permanent thing. And I just have more trust in government a bit more as a general principle than maybe either you do or certainly the conservatives do.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, so the reality in terms of the way that courts work is that they work slowly, right? And they're intended to work slowly. And so, like, you're right that the president often, certainly FDR did this, a lot of people in crisis mode, presidents ought to act in relation to a crisis. And when you're in crisis mode, you will make mistakes. It's not a matter of if you'll make mistakes, it's about how dire are those mistakes going to be. And it's a matter of like, how quickly are you going to be able to remedy those mistakes? And so, like, I'm not knocking Biden for attempting this, and I'm not knocking like the even sort of the sort of underlying desire to have it done. I guess the concern is that in terms of the long-term effects, it needs to be knocked down, if that makes sense, even if in the moment that it was done, the people who were doing it weren't acting in ill will, but even beyond that, weren't even necessarily sort of silly for thinking about it, if that makes sense.
So what would you be comfortable with then, coming out from the federal government? Because we have states that are just basically telling people to die for the economy. And then we also have issues of some states having more. I don't know what the difference is, but we have Kansas City, Missouri, and Kansas City, Kansas, basically right up against each other, right? So if there's two different rules in those two states about masking requirements or whatever else, what would you be comfortable with to ensure that some sort of overall workplace safety thing in the terms of a virus is upheld, since we have states that just don't give a shit? You're frozen on my end.
Frozen?
Yeah, you're frozen on my end. Yeah, I'm gonna turn off my my green screen thing on this thing. I think that might be causing. Anybody?
Hello?
He's breaking up for anybody else? Yeah, your camera's off now.
I left the call and
yeah, it's still breaking up really bad. I can do a ping test on my end, but I don't think it's on my end. Ping test real quick. Oh, come on. Yeah, you're roboting on me. Sorry, folks. Everybody sometimes has technical difficulties, so he'll be back in a moment, I'm sure. I didn't open the window.
Hello?
Yeah, you're still roboting.
That's not good.
Are you on Wi-Fi?
Yeah, I am.
If you still have the stream up, that could be doing it too.
Say it again?
If you still have the stream up, that could have been doing it as well. Don't taking up too much of your resources.
Let's check. That's interesting. Talk again?
Yeah, it's still roboting a bit.
Well, I just closed out of it, so that's not good.
Now you're better.
Oh, I'm good? Okay, cool.
Yeah, you're good now.
Sweet. All right, what were you just saying? I'm sorry.
I lost my thread too. I had asked what you would be comfortable with for general workplace safety in terms of a pandemic.
Yeah, I would definitely be comfortable. So, I mean, if we want to give away masks for free and just like provide every single workforce a bunch of masks, awesome. If you want to give away test kits to anyone who wants them, basically, and certainly to any employer that wants them. I'm very much on board with that.
But no mandates.
If you want,
because all
federal
these
mandates,
no. So all these things
Outside-
are being
outside of
done, and
hospitals,
there's outside of hospitals.
yeah, in hospitals for sure.
Okay.
But outside of hospitals, I don't think so.
So all these things have been done by the federal government, and they're basically being ignored by a large portion of the population because they've been propagandized, or they're just like, fuck you, Biden, whatever. And we have to account for those people as well. So what do you do about that situation? If you're just like, hey, there's nothing we can do about it, I don't know if I don't agree, but I at least I'll understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, I mean, like to sort of describe it as there's nothing I can do about it is a little. I mean, I guess it's somewhat true, because ultimately, like, yes, my answer is that if the people of Kentucky have elected a governor who has views that are demonstrably different than my own views, they have a right to make that decision. And I think it's a wrong decision. But I don't like the idea of building up a precedent where the federal government can make decisions for Kentucky, because presumably that means that the federal government can make decisions. Again, I'm just going to keep coming back to this marijuana example because I think it was a good one. And so, like, yeah, I definitely don't want them making those decisions for California or for New York or whoever it might be.
I mean, I find that to be fair. So I'll definitely have to think about this a bit more. But my gut is still telling me that in these circumstances, I don't think precedent is going to necessarily lead to the things that you are talking about, but I at least understand it. I understand it a lot better. Coming from someone like, hold on a second, I just need. All right, okay, or not, it went away. Of course, I'm like, I caught it, and it's like whatever. But coming from somebody like you, and not somebody that is necessarily conservative, at least a conservative politician, because I don't really believe pretty much anything they say. Right. they're fucking they'll lie out their ass, right? And because they're politician, like, because they're conservative. It's a tough one. But at the same time, I'm not super wedded to. I'm probably not as wedded to federalism as like a first order principle as a lot of people. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, like, there's a question of, like, at a base level, like, this is the way that we set up our system. And so I think that, like, the reading by, like, it, maybe you'll disagree with this, but in my view, like, the reading of the courts, I think is a valid reading, and the reading that I think I would also come to in relation to the Constitution. But there is a question of, like, whether or not the way that we've constructed our system is the right way to construct a system. And in that sense, like, I'm less convinced that it's actually the right way to set up a system, even if it is the way that I read the system as having been set up. Yeah.
Gotcha.
But anyway, interesting to talk to you.
Yeah, likewise, man. Glad you could come on, and we definitely need to have more conversations, like you and I, in general, in the show as well. So if anybody was watching this and liked this, like, brief conversation where there was some, I guess, realization about where the other person's coming from, even if I might necessarily agree right away, be sure to tune in and also drop by, just like Quibbles Over Coffee did over here. Go ahead and shout yourself out a little bit if you still.
Oh yeah, Quibbles Over Coffee on YouTube. At QuibblesC on Twitter. Yeah. Have a good one. Appreciate it.
You too, man. Bye. All right. Whoop. Wait, what happened? Oh no. What? Hold up. What happened to my... Seriously? Did everything change on this? Oh no. Where happened to my camera? Preview. There. That was weird. All right, we're back. All right, so yeah, we like to do that sort of thing here at the News Roundup. So if you want to come in, jump into the Discord, have a little brief conversation about whatever we're talking about, more than welcome to. We're gonna try to keep them a little bit short like that, just because we do have more news that we have to run through. And my dog is scratching, so give me a second. Big dog decided to scratch her big collar. All right. So let's continue on with some of the news going forward here. So we have, for the first time in its history, the Red Cross has declared a national blood crisis. CBS News reported that the COVID-19 pandemic has caused a decline in donor turnout. The cancellation of blood drives and staffing challenges, leading to the worst blood shortage in more than a decade, the Red Cross has said. Last year, the Red Cross saw a 34% decline in new donors. If the nation's blood supply does not stabilize soon, life-saving blood may not be available for some patients when it is needed. It warned in a joint statement with America's Blood Centers and the Association for the Advancement of Blood and Biotherapies. Dr. Jennifer Andrews, the medical director of the Vanderbilt University Medical Center Blood Bank, said that, quote, "Nobody wakes up in the morning and plans on being the next trauma patient. So this literally could affect you or your family members and your loved ones," she had said. Close my window. Got cold in here. Oh no. There we go. All right. Now, continuing on. So Maya Angelou is going to be on the quarter. We're going to go ahead and pop that into here real quick too. Do this. There we go. And boom. There we go. So you can see here, this is Maya Angelou on the U.S. quarter. So the U.S. Mint will soon begin distribution of the Maya Angelou quarter. The quarter is part of the larger American Women Quarters program, which highlights the contribution of women throughout U.S. history. The Mint will continue to issue up to 5 new quarter designs throughout the year through the year 2025. This year's honorees include physicist and astronaut Dr. Sally Ride, the first female principal chief of the Cherokee Nation, William Mankiller, Nina Oten Warren, who was a leader in the New Mexico suffrage movement, and Anna May Wong, the first Chinese-American film star in Hollywood. So there's that. So say bye-bye to Cyber Ninjas. Remember Cyber Ninjas? They were the company headed by the 2022 election conspiracies that was hired by the Senate to conduct an audit of the votes in Maricopa County, Arizona. Their final report revealed that Joe Biden had indeed won the election there, but claimed that they made the news this week in a big way. The Arizona Republic sued the company for not producing public records. Courts upheld the news outlet's suit. The company refused. A federal judge this week held them in contempt and levied a $50,000 per day fine for every day that Cyber Ninjas didn't turn over the documentation. The next day, the company announced that it was out of business. They said they had fired all their employees and were insolvent, so they can no longer afford to produce those documents. What? That's bullshit. And if they get away with this, fuck them. Jesus Christ. They said that the judge responded by telling him that he would apply the fine to individuals and not just the company. Good on this judge. Thank God. That wasn't the end of the bad news for the group, though. And their forensic audit affirmed that Biden's win. They claimed that there had been 77 counts of voter fraud. Okay, that's just bad copy. So they also basically screwed themselves. So let's go on to Texas. And oh God, Texas, the state I live in. Why do you do this? So let's continue. A Republican House candidate in Texas last week made a statement that earned her condemnation from both Republicans and Democrats. NBC News reported that Shelley Luther, a Dallas salon owner who's running to represent State House District 62, tweeted last week that the Chinese students should be banned from attending all Texas universities and called for no more communists. While the tweet has since been deleted, Luther doubled down on his sentiment with 2 other separate posts, saying that taxpayers should not be subsidizing the next generations of CCP leaders, and that it's, quote, common sense that CCP members would not have access to our schools, in reference to the Chinese Communist Party. Now, let's break down these lies here a little bit, all right? First of all, Chinese students are actually subsidizing American students. In fact, all foreign national students are subsidizing American students because they have to pay full price for admissions, and sometimes even some states do a surcharge on top of that for admitting a foreign student. So it's like the same thing about like a student that attends university in a different state, they have to pay the out-of-state fee, which is basically doubles the cost of tuition. Well, that happens to Chinese students as well. And sometimes, like I said, they incur an additional international student fee. Now, not only that, the fact that they're CCP members doesn't mean shit. Not really. Now, there is cause of concern sometimes with spying. That's true. But just being a member of the CCP doesn't mean anything, because in order to be middle class in China, you basically have to be a CCP member. And that's just basically pledging to the party and the country your loyalty and signing a couple of papers, and that's it. It doesn't mean that you're actually like a party official that runs the country. It just means that you're a member of the party. And so it's really stupid to say this. Now, continuing on, State Representative Jean Wu, a Democrat whose parents came to the United States as Chinese students, released a statement Friday demanding an apology from Luther. He wrote that Asian Americans have called for officials to stop stoking the flames of anti-Asian hate for the past 2 years during the pandemic. Quote, to casually conflate all Chinese students in America with actual registered members of the ruling party in the People's Republic of China is not only ignorance of extreme nature, it is also the type of rhetoric that drives anti-Asian hate crimes, he said in a statement. And this is 100% true, especially in areas where people are a bit more conservative, anti-liberal. Luther followed up with a tweet calling Wu a socialist Democrat who doesn't show up to work and an enemy of the people. Yeah, of course, because anybody that tells your fucking racist ass you're a piece of shit is an enemy of the American people because they hate you, right? That's what this means. Now, Luther claimed that Texas Republicans agree with her stance on Chinese students. However, J.C. Jedin, a Republican state representative, shut her down, calling on others in the GOP to stand against the ban. Quote, to do otherwise is an attempt to score cheap political points by targeting Chinese people, but real leaders know that there is a huge distinction between Chinese individuals and the Chinese government, Jedin, an Asian American himself, wrote. He added that Luther does not speak for Republicans or Texans like me. Now, hey everybody, thank you all again for joining the program. Now, if this is your first time you joined it, hey, this is the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup. We do this from 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to roughly about 10 p.m. Standard Time. Got about 13 minutes left in the show, so we're going to hit some of these facts pretty quickly. So if you like what you're hearing, hey man, you know what? Hit that fucking like button for the algorithms. It really does help us out, and it really spreads the word by helping with the algorithms. Now, if you want to get more involved in our communities, there's 2 places you can go. Well, 3 places you can go, really. First is the Discord. Go ahead and join us on Discord, and you can be on the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup and any of our other cast and whatever else we do. And you can talk about different things around politics and social issues and just general slice of life things. We are going to be doing contests on there as well. So, hey, join the Discord, get tuned in for that. And also Twitter, you can see memes and whatever else I'll feel like sharing at the time. And it's a good time. And we also do run a Facebook group. I know the audience that turns into this live isn't really up on the Facebook, but if you do Facebook, you can join the Facebook group at Facebook/groups/Tribune Commons. So let's go ahead and continue into the economy. So we're going to start this segment with some decent news about the economy and then talk about some not so decent news. So, according to a report from the Associated Press, the federal government last month posted its smallest monthly budget deficit in 2 years, thanks to a rebounding economy to help boost tax receipts, coupled with slower spending as some COVID relief programs ended. The Treasury Department reported Wednesday that the December deficit of $21.3 billion was the smallest monthly deficit since $13 billion shortfall in December of 2019. That was before the COVID pandemic hit in the United States and pushed millions of people out of work and sent the economy into a short but steep recession. For the first 3 months of this year's budget, which began on October 1st, the government has recorded a deficit of $377.7 billion. That's a 30.1% below the shortfall run-up during the same period a year ago, when the government was still spending trillions of dollars to keep the economy from falling into an even deeper funk. Many of those government programs have now ended and are being tapped less as more people get back to work. In the October-December period, government revenues were up by 30.1% compared to the same period a year ago. Tax revenues from the individuals and corporations were both up solid amounts, reflecting an economy growing this year at the fastest pace since the mid-1980s. Government spending during the period rose by a much smaller 3.8% compared to the same period a year ago to $1.4 trillion. Government outlays and tax receipts, which total $1.05 trillion, were both records for the first 3 months of a budget year. The December deficit of $21.3 billion compared to the deficit in December of 2020 of $143.6 billion. So all these numbers are coming at you pretty fast, but long story short is that we are taking in more money than we were during the pandemic and spending a bit less than we were, so the deficit is slowing there. There would have actually been a surplus last month if not for the calendar quirks that required some government benefit programs from January to be paid in December. Economists believe that with the COVID spending winding down, this year's deficit will be about half the size of the 2021 shortfall. Now, let's talk about the economy and the labor market more broadly. It's no secret that inflation is a global concern. In the United States, the Consumer Price Index rose to 0.08% in December for an annualized rate of 7%, the highest in 40 years. Now, it's also important to note that, as we said earlier, that that jobs are also showing a large rebound. And so some of this might be caused by a growing economy. The Fed will raise interest rates in March and potentially twice more this calendar year, with an eye towards reducing inflation, though without ramping up borrowing costs so much that the economy tumbles into a recession. The pandemic is a constant concern, of course, as Omicron sweeps the country. But there are positive signs for the economy. Inflation is all we seem to hear about in the press, but Jamie Dimon, the long-term CEO and chairman of JP Morgan Chase, sees the best economic growth in decades. According to CNBC reported, quote, "We're going to have the best growth we've ever had this year, I think since maybe sometime after the Great Depression," Dimon told CNBC Bertha Combs during the 40th annual JP Morgan Healthcare Conference. Next year will be pretty good too. His confidence stems from the robust balance sheets of the American consumer. JP Morgan is the biggest US bank by assets and has a relationship with half of the country's households. The consumer balance sheets have never been in better shape. They're spending 25% more today than pre-COVID, Dimon says. Their debt service ratio is better than it's been since we've been keeping records for 50 years. Dimon said that growth will come even as the Fed raises rates, possibly more than investors expected. Goldman Sachs economists predicted 4 rate hikes this year, and Dimon said he would be surprised if the central bank didn't go further. It's possible that inflation is worse than they think, and they raise rates more than people think, Dimon said. I personally would be surprised if it's just 4 increases. Banks tend to prosper in rising rate environments because their lending margins expand as rates climb. Indeed, bank stocks have surged so far this year as rates have climbed. The KBW Bank Index jumped 10% last week, the best start to a year on record for the 24 company index. However, Dimon said that while the underlying economy looks strong, stock market investors may endure a tumultuous year as the Federal Reserve goes to work. The quote, "The market is different," Dimon said. "We're kind of expecting that the market will have a lot of volatility this year as rates go up and people kind of redo projections. If we're lucky, the Fed can slow things down and will have what they call a soft landing," Dimon said. Now, with the soft landing in particular, this is what was called about in the 90s when the Federal Reserve played with interest rates like they are doing now, and when the economy got too hot is what they said. So if unemployment, they say the economy is too hot if there's too much inflation and too much job growth, because that's how they measure it. So what they do is they jack interest rates up, and so that's basically punching the market in the nose. So you're going to see it up, and then you go, bam, interest rates, right? And it starts to tumble. And then they're like, and then it tumbles, and then they slowly lower the rates, and you come down like, so it's like up, down, and then like that, right? I don't know. That was some fucking weird shit, but you get the idea, right? You get the idea. And so they're hoping for that same kind of scenario. Now, one thing that isn't being talked about in the news a lot, and it needs to be when they're talking about this, is millennials, the giant killers, the people that are taking away all the good boomer shit about like Applebee's and whatever else have you, and just destroying businesses left and right. Well, guess what's happening to millennials? All right, what's happening to us? All right. Well, if you take that the youngest millennial was born in 1999, that puts millennials at about 23 years old right now, right? Right. So let's do 2022, 1999. Yep, 23 years old. I had to double check my math because my brain is fried. But the reason why that matters is because when does family formation happen? Well, typically happens around 24 years old. So if the youngest millennial is 23, then the oldest millennial is roughly around 36, and you have an age range between there, and that is prime baby making ages. Well, or family formation, whatever. I mean, some people are not having kids, right? But what does that mean? Well, that means that people are going to buy houses, people are getting married. That means buying more shit and to fill up their giant houses with, like I did last year. And so we are seeing this happen, folks. We are seeing millennials come into their adulthood proper. A little bit delayed because of the Great Recession and stuff like that, but we are seeing it happen. And with that, you're going to see spending. With spending, you're going to see growth. And with growth, you're going to see inflation. It's just the way things work. So don't be surprised if the Fed does raise rates and housing becomes a bit more expensive. Don't be surprised if that doesn't curb inflation as much as one would expect, especially with the supply chain issues that we're seeing to incur. But as I've been saying on this program pretty much every week since, 6 months ago, we'll start to see prices stabilize and potentially even go down starting around March, even before the Federal Reserve even does one rate hike. Why? Because a lot of this is driven by the supply chain, and the supply chain is going to get fixed. It's just going to happen. So let's continue on with some more news though. All right. But Biden is bullish on the economy and labor. On Friday, this is last Friday, Biden took the podium to hail the state of the economy and the labor market. Quote, today's national unemployment rate fell 4% to 4.39%, the sharpest one-year drop in the employment in the United States history. Full employment is considered around 5%. We're overemployed right now, according to the Federal Reserve. That's causing inflation. And we've added 6.4 million new jobs since January of last year. That's the most jobs in any calendar year by any president in history. Biden's arguments wasn't just spin. A year ago, the unemployment rate was 6.7%, and Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, was describing the economic path ahead as highly uncertain. Last March, Congress, at the behest of Biden, passed the American Rescue Plan, a $1.9 trillion stimulus bill, which provided financial support for households, businesses, state, and local governments. The jobless rate is now below 4%, and Powell and his colleagues at the Fed are preparing to raise interest rates on the grounds that the economy is approaching maximum employment and inflation has risen sharply. The inflation spike present a grave political challenge to the White House, of course, but it's only part of the economic story. For the past year, Biden and Democrats have done a less than stellar job of emphasizing the other parts of their record in terms of jobs and income. The rebound from the economy economic plunge that accompanied the first wave of COVID-19 has been far more rapid than most economists had expected. Now, it also should be noted that while the stimulus bills have actually helped with this, presidents don't control the economy. So don't give him too much credit on this. The stimulus bills helped immensely. But Biden could just phone it in for the next 2 years and we'd be fine. At least I think we'd be fine. So just keep that in mind. So last February, for example, the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office predicted the unemployment rate would dip below 4% until the first quarter of 2026, 4 years from now. So that's impressive. In his remarks on Friday, Biden also emphasized that the labor force participation rate has rebounded significantly. Workers, especially low-wage workers, have enjoyed substantial gains over the past year, in part due to states and local governments raising their minimum wage to $15 an hour. Quote from Biden, "Women and men who work in the frontline jobs at restaurants, hotels, travel, tourism, desk clerks, line cooks, wait staff, bellmen, they all saw their wages at historic high, the highest in history," he said. Their pay went up almost 16% this year, far ahead of inflation, which is still a concern. The facts back Biden here. And they were also on his side when taking another jab at the former president without naming him. Biden noted, quote, "The stock market, the last guy's measure of everything, is about 20% higher than it was when my predecessor was here." The political problems facing the White House is that there's a huge disconnect between economists' assessment of the economy, which are mostly positive, and the assessment of voters, which are far more negative. How can this be explained? The standard answer is that many Americans are filtering virtually all of their economic news through the lens of inflation. Rising inflation is clearly a very potent political issue, probably because it is highly visible and affects virtually everyone, and perhaps because Americans have gotten used to low rates of inflation. Prior to the pandemic, the last time that the inflation rate reached 6% was in 1990, when oil prices spiked during the run-up to the Gulf War. Now, another thing that needs to be stated here, and I don't know if I can stress this enough, but another thing that needs to be stated here is that there is pent-up demand for everything, and that includes inflation. We had catering inflation to 0.06% or something like that in the first few months of 2020. And what we're seeing is that hole has been completely filled, and we're at a trajectory of replacing that and continuing normal inflation. And a lot of that is due to pent-up demand. A lot of that is due to quote-unquote excess savings. That's just an economist term for something. So when everybody was at home, not spending money, they were sitting on cash. Now, this isn't everybody. This is mostly middle-class people who could work from home, like you, like me, like some of the people that are watching this, right? And they weren't as negatively impacted by COVID as frontline workers were. And that's why they called it the V-shaped or the K-shaped recovery. And these people are now out there spending money hand over fist, going on all the vacations that they missed, buying homes because they didn't have to, they had enough money saved up to actually do that. So that pushed that forward a bit. Going out to restaurants a lot more than they were during the pandemic, etc. Seeing live shows and that sort of thing as well. And so that's going to cause inflation as well. So these are things, all these things go into inflation. It's not just the amount of money in circulation it's not just the amount of money the government puts into circulation, but the amount of money people put into the circulating economy. We have to remember that. And inflation can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. If everybody is worried about inflation, and you can cause inflation by people buying goods and services sooner than they would otherwise, especially when it comes to home prices. These are all things that we have to keep in mind. So another factor which shouldn't be downplayed, at this stage, trying to win over adherent Trump supporters may be a lost cause, but the White House and other parts of the Democratic Party could do a more effective job of making their economic case to independents, to moderates, Republicans who crossed over in 2020, and to Democrats who are down in the dumps after 2021. Biden's spirited remarks on Friday represent a start, but he still has a lot of work to do. All right, we are over time, so we're going to go ahead and skip over to our segment that we like to end with called News of the Weird. And for this episode of News of the Weird, we're going to talk about robot companions in Japan and what that might mean for everybody going forward. So Japan has had a long reputation for being robot obsessed. It is now in increasing numbers turning to so-called quote-unquote companion robots, AI-packed androids that exist simply to make us happy or less lonely in COVID times. And these kind of things are what we're going to see now. Let's go ahead and play this.
The puppies at this Tokyo get-together
and this
are
is from
machines.
CBS News.
And yet, from their camera-embedded snouts to their sensor-packed paws, these
Look
high-tech
at my
hounds are
puppy.
nothing less than
Oh
members
my
of the
goodness, that
family.
was so cute.
Fussed over and carted around like poodles or toddlers to the beach or to be blessed at the Shinto shrine.
Nice.
Artificial intelligence-driven personalities minutely shaped by the whims and habits of their owners. It's no wonder Sony's
robots are
robotic
learning.
dog Aibo has pawed its way into hearts and minds.
Do you all remember that Futurama episode where Bender gets a puppy? I'm seeing that in these ones, and I want this dog to say begin 2-hour yipping session and just starts yipping, because that would be hilarious.
Relaunched in 2017, the social companion is designed to be cute and tirelessly affectionate, building the kind of intense emotional attachments usually associated with kids or beloved pets. Noriko Yamada rushed to order a nearly $3,000 robo-dog
Jesus
when her
Christ.
mother-in-law began showing signs of dementia.
Mother had stopped smiling and talking, but when we switched the dog on and it gazed up at her, she just lit up. Her behavior changed 180 degrees.
And that's where we're gonna end that a little bit with, so we don't get held up by the algorithms here, and it doesn't screw me. But this is something that's been done before. There was these robotic seals that were used for dementia care, and it's why not, right? I don't see any harm in this. Like, old people need companionship. If they can get it from a AI driven dog that goes up to them or whatever, fine, whatever. I do not want to see this whole like robots replace pets, which replace kids thing that we might see coming around, because that's got other problems and implications for that. You know, don't have sex with robots is like they said in Futurama. I don't want to see like people completely distancing themselves from everyday people. But with something like this, I think this is very cool. I see no necessary direct harm involved with this particular venture. And I wouldn't mind having one myself, honestly. But I have 2 dogs, and I can't really deal with a third one, even if it's a robot. So, but everybody, with that, I am sad to say that we are out of time. We know you liked what you heard because you stayed with us to the end, so go ahead again and smash that like button for the algorithms. It really does help us out. And if you want to stay tuned, stay with us just for a moment. We will be raiding somebody, and I'm going to find out who we're going to raid in a minute. Let's see who we're going to raid. All right, come on. Pop up. Oh, it didn't pop up. Okay, I guess it doesn't want to pop up. Maybe I gotta sign back into it. All right. There we go. Sometimes the stream deck doesn't want to work with me. Who we got? Critical thinking veteran, Universal Discord, Montreal player, Freems, Maddie Cakes. Let's go ahead and read Maddie Cakes. Maddie Cakes is good, people. She takes no shit from nobody, and she can be feisty and she can be fun. So we're gonna go ahead and raid Maddie Cakes. So everybody, glad you stuck with us. And as we say at Crowdsourced Politics, keep your head up through the political storm.